It's Renato. The other guys are joining because we are just a few. I think we are just 3 actually.
Okay, so here in Ipuco, I think we have a miracle. We have, I don't know, 20 guys into a small room. But it's good. Okay, so Renato, I already mentioned something here, so I will cover what you guys missed on the end of the meeting. Okay.
Okay,
But
okay.
today I'm going to restart from the point that I presented the agenda for today and start that first topic, the callbacks help. Okay. So I'm going to start now, Renato, and this meeting is being recorded. So as soon as the guys join, they can see that. So
Hey, Thiago, Henrique is here too. Henrique Filho.
hi, Henrique. Hi, Henrique. Okay,
Hey,
welcome. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so today I have this agenda. I'm going to talk about good practices, callbacks hell, some patterns, and some warnings, some performance things. To start, I would go over this article here, callbacks hell. So what is that? I was talking to the guys before you guys join that sometimes if we chain one function as a callback or return for another function and another and another and another, it makes it very hard to understand. So in this example, we can see defining a function that calls a function callback for each, a function callback for a size, another function callback for each, and another function as a parameter. So it is very hard to work this way. So the solution for that is keys. I just told the guys I'm going to do it again. This is a very good principle. Keep it simple, stupid. This is the key principle. If you just follow this principle, we can divide this code better. So here, coming back to the example, one practice that it's suggested is to name the functions. So even though we have function and function and function, if we start to give names to those functions, it gets easier to understand what this block is doing. Okay, so this would be like a first step when refactoring this code. The first step could be this. Second step, keep the code shallow. Thank you. This is make the code flat. So I think another way would be flat because it's recursion and self-invocations make a lot of nested code. So you can look here. If you look in the indentation, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 levels of indentation, and it's hard to read. So if we refactor and extract those functions into really external functions, we are keeping this code flat. So we are calling post response here. Okay. Another step is modularize or creating a library. What is that? Here it's declaring a function, form submit, which calls post response, and there is an object that contains form submit. So this it's a module. So we are creating a kind of a library. We are creating one object export that contains other objects. And this is much better than doing this way because here we are declaring this to the global scope, which is bad, unless this whole code is inside another function. But if we start seeing this directly in the root of the root context, it would be global, which is not good. So another way to do that, which is an alternative. So let's suppose I have this code here. Let me save this as JS. Okay. So here it's declaring form submit, post response, and exports. But this is still not ideal because you already declared for submit in the global scope. So this, if you do this, is the same thing as if you had declared var form submit is equals to function. And indeed, we are declaring to the global. So a better way to do that is directly create this. We can use the modular pattern that we explored the previous session. So we can, let's suppose we have exports is an object. Export and submit is that. Exports dot post response is a function, and we could call this dot post response. Okay. So this way it starts to get it flatter.
This is from export?
Yes. Or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So yes. Yeah.
Yes. But I prefer to code in another way, which is this way. And instead of equals, we have exports. Exactly. So I prefer to do this way. Here we are creating a module. We are declaring functions flat. Okay. And there is another point here about promises, which is asynchronous, but you can read it later. So this is just to start this subject. So callbacks can be a hell if we let it grow. Okay? Any questions about that?
No.
Yeah, this is a light topic, so let's move on. I want to go over, this is a very good article about best practices on JavaScript. This covers a lot. So we don't need to read everything. I'm not going to mention everything. I'm just going to comment things that I think are very meaningful, and then you can read it later. Because all of those articles, they are long. So, and it's better for you to read yourself and understand. Okay, so I'm just going to comment some things here. This is important, bad variables names. So in any way, you need to come up with a good name of vars that will describe what you are doing. It should not be too long, like this, and should not be too generic.
Like whatever.
Like whatever.
Anything.
So, for instance, if you look in some code, you could see that there is a very common pattern of a callback function E. And here we call E prevent default. This is fine, but why not event? What is E? You don't know, but event you know.
It can be an exception.
Yes. Because if you are working in a project that you use event, every time, you know what it is about. But even though it's a good practice. Another thing that I usually do is whenever we have fors, people loop using I. Sometimes I like to use index because it's just a few letters more, and then it's very clear what you're doing. Because if you're doing just one for, it's fine. But if you have 3 nested fors, it's a good practice.
IJK and
Yes, Dijkstra. So exactly. So this is about naming. Okay. So here there is a good question. So let's suppose you wanted to check if the person reached majority. If you put is over 18, it might not make sense in some countries because US, for instance, the legal age is not 18, it's 21. Brazil is 18. So if you just replace to is legal age, you are doing the same thing, but you are passing yes. Actually, you are describing the problem.
Yeah. You can parameterize and use it in every context.
Yes. avoid globals. We already talked about that. The worst thing of global, actually there are two worst things in global. One worst thing in global is the name collision, because all the vars are going to be declared in the same context. So that's a hard problem. But for me, this is not the worst problem. For me, the worst problem is that you are attaching variables to the global context, which means that unless you delete them, they will never be garbage collected. Okay? All the vars that you declare in the global, and you don't explicitly delete or nullify, they're never going to be removed, garbage collected. And sometimes it's not needed. You can just create a var, or you can use the self-invoking functions. So let's start to do something for real. Oh, ha. Yes, for the guys on the phone, I was just using emit to generate some code here. So if we have a var name, let's suppose you need a var just to manipulate some strings. So you have this var, chitão, of course, and then you need to append. You need to actually create another var called action, which is name space things. Okay, so let's suppose you only created this to do a console log of the action. So if you just had this code, you created two vars, name and action, that are going to be there forever. But you need the vars. So you could try to do everything just one line, but let's suppose it's some complex thing. So my opinion, just create self-invoking functions. Right? So let's start calling this guy and testing it. Chitão things. Okay? So if you just do that, you remove those vars from the context. Because if I come here and type name, so name is not anything. Action is not defined. Maybe name was something else. If I remove this and call this, if I say name, I can see chitão. If I say action, I can see chitão things. Okay?
What name was defined as an
Yeah, maybe the name was some default thing.
Yeah, maybe some default from Chrome.
Yes. Oh, I didn't say. Come on. Name is chitão, because maybe it cached the
Did you
name.
refresh?
I did refresh, but maybe it's on the cache. Ctrl Shift R. That's interesting. Okay.
I'm saying, man, this thing is magic.
So, when you declare the variable at the root level, they are going to be global, and obviously that's not a good practice. So a good solution would be enclosing in a function.
Yes.
So the variables just exist in this context.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
I think the new version of
supposed to have.
But there's something
Even if you
weird there.
refresh the page, it keeps
I know
the old
that's-
variables values that you're using.
Okay. So maybe if
I think if you close and open again the DevTools, it's gonna
Or maybe
clean the variables.
yes.
keep it open. Disable the cache.
Okay. Yes, that's it. Thank you. Okay. So let's continue here.
Chad,
Oh yeah,
if
sorry.
I'm not mistaken, there are also different between the declaration of the variable using var and not using var, right?
So inside the global context, it's the same.
Mhm.
If you are in the global, if you say name, var name chitão, or just name chitão, this is the same. But if you are inside one another function, like here, if you don't put var,
You are exposing.
This is declaring as global.
Okay.
So
No, actually, I think it's not declaring as global. It will try to
get
find
a
the
global
find
one.
the-
parent context
That have
Ah,
the
yes.
search for that
variable
variable.
with the
And
same name.
Search
it
for a
causes
global
a
one.
performance issue.
Yes, but in this case, it's going to be like a global.
Yeah.
If we had another function that declares this name before, then it would go, yeah, that's right. So let's go on. Revealing module, okay. Coding style, comment as much as needed, but not more. Okay. Mixing with other technologies. Okay. This is something hard to prevent, but we can do better. In this case, we are using JavaScript to set up CSS properties.
Using
And this
vanilla.
is, yes, vanilla. We are using vanilla.js. A better practice would be not doing this inside the JavaScript, but instead of manipulating the attributes of CSS, we would just add a class, and then we would manipulate those things inside the CSS class. Okay? So it's also the same things when you use JavaScript with Ruby languages, ERB, or with JSP. It's the same thing. Sometimes we just need to manipulate JSP things, and we are receiving those things in JavaScript. So we should make things less dependent of each other. Okay.
I never saw this before. For equals. It's like,
For equals, yes.
Yeah.
I never saw this before, and
maybe it's an error.
maybe it's an error.
Equals a lot.
There are three there.
Yeah.
We could try this.
Yes.
This
Open the console
makes
and
sense,
test.
but four.
If let's suppose true equals true is true. Equals true is true, and equals
Oh my
equals
gosh.
equals true. Yes, it doesn't. It's wrong. It's wrong.
I had so
Okay.
many hopes.
Oh, meu. Ô, Morico.
Maybe
This could solve my problem.
maybe this is for Chinese people, because it's hard to differentiate Chinese people. They are all look like,
Yeah.
so they need to have four
The
equals.
valley, a class, and the river.
Okay.
The margin of the river.
It's very hard to. Okay. So shortcut notations, and you know that the Chinese guys, they think we are identical too.
Really?
Yeah?
Yes.
Why? They are blind.
No,
You
it's
are
point of
blind.
view.
Look at the similarities, man. Look.
I think it's
There's
hard.
No way. There's no way.
It's hard, but they see things different.
Really, yeah,
Okay. Here it is suggesting to use some shortcut notations, like instead of setting up each element of the vector, you can just define one vector. This is good. This is very smart. I like this very much. Instead of doing this code, if v, I think I wanted to, okay. So this is a very nice thing. If v, we define x equals to v, else x equals to 10. So we can just do this in one line. This is a very smart and elegant approach. This or, okay? The same thing, a very similar thing using this operator, the ternary, just like Java, C. Okay? So the first clause is the true, and the second is the false sentence. Modularize, it's something that we talked already. Enhance progressively, allow for configuration, translation. Everything that's likely to change in your code should not be scattered through your code. Yes, so it's better to keep the changeable things together apart from the non-changeable things. Which, for instance, in Java, we usually create constants. To not hard code things, then we use the value of constants and we declare the constants in the beginning of the file, right?
Yeah.
So this is similar. It's the same idea. We have an object here called config that contains some strings, labels, and we use this as a config object in the return. So every time you need to change, you don't need to scroll to browse your code. You just need to change it here. And you can even reuse those values elsewhere. So it's a good practice. Okay, so all those things are there. You can read later. Here is part 2. Part 2, so this is about heavy nesting, is related with the callback hell. What we can do to avoid. So here he exported, so there was this scenario of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 indentation levels. And then he exported some functions, and I think he changed some methods, and he improved things a little bit. Optimize loops. Okay, this is important. Loops can be slow, okay? Loops can be very slow. There is a loop in JavaScript that's terrible. It's the in. Do you know the in? So JavaScript for in. You should never use that. Unless you are doing a example.
Do not.
Yeah. Because yeah, this is similar to Java for each. You have an array, you pass one iterator in one object here. So it's good that you don't need to pass the index, you don't need to get the index, an object from the array, but this is just one line. And then this has a terrible performance.
What about the each for
Each.
jQuery?
Okay, so the each for jQuery doesn't use that. It uses this one. So if we go here to Vanilla.js, I don't know if we have a comparator here, but I saw sometime before, like for, JavaScript for each performance jQuery. There was a article. No, this is about jQuery actually.
There's the link below is saying that.
No, ideas.
Yes, but this is Stack Overflow. It was an article.
Yes, each versus
That's a Stack
This one?
Man, don't underestimate Stack Overflow.
And Stack Overflow, maybe adopt. Maybe you find the question.
Yes. Okay, this is a benchmark. Using the for loop comparing to the each of jQuery. So we could see that for loop is the double of the performance. In some cases, if you use this inside the for, it slows down tremendously. Yeah, so there's a lot of discussions here. So I'm going to search, because I saw another article, but I didn't save. It would get each and call it on every JavaScript library, because there are implementations for each in many different libraries, and it would compare. So then we can see.
Check another point.
Rather
than performance for using var I
in
the for each JavaScript for each that
The worst
you
code ever.
So that's why our test
is that you have some maybe you have
I
like
just coded
an
once.
array extension, a plugin that extends the array.
a plugin extends the array.
Yes,
Like the miner,
let's do like array.prototype.something equals. Then every time that you use a for each inside that any array, as the array object global is extended, it's gonna every time get this property, this function that you create as an property of that value. Then it's gonna get that index and mess up every data that you have there.
Yes. So there is even another related thing that he suggests here. So let's suppose you are doing a normal for. So you should not put the length in the second clause, because the second clause is the clause that's going to be compared every iteration. And it will call length every iteration. Sometimes length can be a method, can call a method that would do a computation. So it's just very simple. Just move the name's length to another var here. In this part that declares the var, this part just runs once, and just uses this value here. So it's also related. Just by doing that, we can improve the performance if the effort is huge.
This code will crash.
Tiago, what about moving? Does it have any impact
Compare it.
about moving the var declaration to the top of the function?
No, it's better.
It's better
Uh-huh.
because you said that the last meeting.
Yes, it's better. It's
So,
better.
but there's no performance issue.
No. So
I crash.
keep DOM access to a minimum. This is something that I wanna comment today. So I have an application with Backbone.js, and I have a iterator, okay? And this iterator, so I'm gonna open here. So you don't need to know this. You don't need to know Backbone to understand this example. It's simple, okay? It's about, actually, I prefer to use my other project, which is in STS. So it takes a while. But until it loads, this is the thing. So let's suppose we have a template, and this template is running multiple times. Let's suppose we have a list of things, and for every item, you are inserting it into the DOM. So this is not ideal. It's better, instead of doing that, we should just insert the things into one element that is not in the DOM. So we can create an element that is not in the DOM using fragment. So there is a function called create document.create document fragment. This function creates an element that is not attached to the DOM. So the best thing would be manipulate this guy. If you need to insert, if you need to use jQuery to insert things there, insert, do, iterate, and just once include this guy to the DOM. Because the DOM access is heavy. So this is a very important
It's
thing.
in memory. The DOM itself is in memory.
No, but the DOM is in memory. It's linked to the browser. So if you do an operation in the DOM, it will reflect in the browser.
You generate events.
Yes, and
about
it
the-
will also, maybe the DOM is huge, and then it will need to access the DOM, find the element, do the changes, and return.
No.
So this makes things
Yeah.
slow. So the desirable way is to manipulate if you are creating an element, do not create this element on the DOM before. Create in the memory in a fragment, manipulate, and then insert just once. Okay?
It's interesting to know how to do it on Backbone.
Yes, so I have for instance, this thing. This is an application that I created because I'm writing an article about Backbone.js for Java Magazine. And I created this project to exemplify this article. So there is a template here. If I can find, I'm using Play framework, which is similar to Rails, but for Java. It's very nice. And I'm using the templates in handlebars. So if I have a project, okay? In this project, it might be hard for you guys to see. So I have an element called a section ID with the project. And one project can contain many stories. This is just a card system, a Kanban for project management. So we have projects, stories, and issues, okay? So one project can contain multiple stories. We have one section here, which is the element that's going to receive the project. So sorry, the stories for the project. So I will render every story for that project and inject here. So the way that I did that is on view project.js, and I create a container. Do you guys know how to increase the font size in Eclipse easily? I need to edit, right?
Easily, I don't know.
Because Sublime is easy. Eclipse is not easy.
Go to
It's on the
projects preference.
It's on the no.
And
no,
there's a search on properties. You
Oh,
can
is
find
it?
I think it's Java editor, right?
No.
it's
We can try the search.
Just make a
Use
single
the
search.
search, yes. on
Text
sites.
editor.
Oh yeah, you can try this one. Like
No, it's not on the properties, it's on preferences.
Char is on preference. Go
Yeah.
to the
Window
tool suite. Tool suite. The
It's
other
here,
menu.
right?
No,
not
not
this one, the
properties.
other menu.
Okay.
The last one.
Command,
Yeah,
comma.
this one. Preference.
Ah, okay. Text editor.
Shit, don't teach.
Don't teach it.
Colors and fonts.
One level above.
You don't dance
No.
anymore.
Search for
man, I
font
do
size.
Dancing, change font
Just
size.
font.
Yes.
Monaco 11. But this is Aptano. No, this is
No, there's
Aptano.
colors and fonts up there.
Yes, I tried,
Thiago,
but
go to general. No, just eliminate the font. Just eliminate
Basic.
The font.
Tá.
No, just eliminate that.
okay.
Go to general.
Uh-huh.
The general tab. Go to editors.
Text editors.
Text editors.
And then I go above, and I will not find this.
Then I think it's color and fonts.
There's a
There's
magnifier
a
when
basic
you watch
option there. Basic. The
Basic.
first one.
Okay.
Yes, this guy.
And then
Text
text
fonts.
fonts.
Yes.
So I like Eclipse, but it's hard, man, to do things. Sublime is much easier.
I don't like it.
There might be a shortcut.
It's easy.
I forget. Where you edited that.
Apply. Okay. So it worked.
Back to 11.
It worked. So instead of, I'm going to put 18, 24, 25, right?
Yeah, it's a fact.
24.
Whoa.
Come on, guys.
Yes.
Help me.
Open it on the notepad.
I think I'll copy
You
that
don't
to
have
Sublime.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to browse. So 20. 24, 25 was too big. 20 is good. So then I close this. I apply, and then I okay. Okay. Good. So we have container fragment. Here I'm creating an element. Container fragment is this container fragment. And then every time I do something here, you don't need to know what I'm doing, but I'm rendering a view. And then this is generating HTML. And I am appending this to the container fragment. After I did all the iterations, I just go once to the DOM, find the project, the elements, and then an append. So just by doing that, I am avoiding a lot of overhead. Okay?
The fragment is an empty DOM.
No, it's not on a DOM. The fragment is an empty element outside the DOM.
Yeah, but I mean it's like an empty
Div.
element it's a div.
It's just like a div, but it's not a div. It's a in-memory root container.
That's what I mean. It's empty. So, for example, if you create a fragment and insert, it's going to be empty.
Yes.
There's nothing there.
Yes.
It's the same as creating elements by using jQuery. You create a jQuery element div.
No, because this you are creating a div, and here you don't create a div. This is nothing. This is just a root, and then you can append to this a div. You are creating a context that can receive elements.
But
Okay.
He's asking about the jQuery like to do. Var element equals $sign, and you create some elements
Yes.
there.
Yes, it's
Then you're not appending to
You're not
DOM
appending to the
It's
DOM.
not append to the DOM.
Yes, exactly. No, that's a good idea too. But if you do that, you have a root. You have to assume that you have a root element for
Yes.
all the elements to append. Sometimes you don't have a root element. Sometimes you have three brothers.
Yes.
You have three P, and P. So they don't have a root element. So then you append all of them to the fragments. Okay?
Okay.
So that's a good practice. Avoid the DOM access. Don't trust any data. That we should be aware of data problems. Development code, not live code. Okay. So live code is production code. Live code is written for machines. Development code is written for humans. So if you want to dispatch code for production, we should try to minify, collate. Collate is also concatenate. Is a very good practice that Rails does. It gets all the files, the JS files, and merge into just one file. So by doing that, we reduce the number of requests the browser makes to the server. The browser will just make one request, that one JS that already comes minified and also compressed. So another good performance hit is getting a container, getting a server, like you can use Apache and Ginks, but configure the server to compress, to deliver compressed JavaScript to the client. So in production. So this is a good thing.
Nice.
Okay.
I just read the second paragraph.
The second paragraph.
Yeah.
Don't optimize prematurely and punish your fellow developers and those who have to take over. Yes, because we, in this way, Rails and Play, they have different profiles. Profile for development, profile for production. So it's easy. Okay. Patterns for large-scale JavaScript application architecture. This is a very good article from Adios Mani. I really recommend you guys to read sometime. This is not hard. This is not very advanced level, so all you guys can understand properly. So it just talks about how to prepare the JavaScript architecture for the large scale demands. Okay, so it will come up and suggest you to use a module, suggest you to use MVC like YY, jQuery, objects, some design patterns like facade, mediator. So this is a very good read. Okay, it's on the links there. I have also 3 Brazilian things. So this guy, Vini Baggio, he's the author of a Rails book for Caso. He works in Pivotal, which develops Jasmine, and he also has a blog that gives some tips from the Good Parts book. This is a very good book, by the way. I think I told you last time. Yeah. It's a very good book. So I am not going to comment this now, but I will ask you to take a look because it shows some examples that are controverted. Okay, so he has 3. I'm going to include into that intranet because it's not here. I'm going to include here some posts from him. Okay. Okay. I wanna comment something from myself now. One very important thing, in my opinion, that happens a lot. You should not use ID on repeatable templates. So ID should be unique in the page, right? It's the only one. Like if you are marking an element to retrieve later using jQuery or using DOM, if you mean to use ID, it must be unique, right? If it might not be unique, you can use class or you can even use data attribute, which is better because when you use class, you are polluting the CSS namespaces as well. So sometime later you might decide to implement a class with the same name that you used before. Some elements can start to look different. So if you just want to hang some events on the page, I like to use data elements, just like I do here in this. This is a view from Backbone. I am I'm hanging this into using the data action delete. This is an event. But what is important here is that if you are designing a template, mostly you should avoid ID. Even though your template maybe will run just once, maybe someone in the future might want to reuse your template. And then if you reuse the template in multiple instances, you're going to have multiple times the ID. And this is terrible. I remember I saw that in Macy's, and I fixed that sometime. It's very common because the guys created a JSP that has many IDs. One project created this. So another project decided to reuse that JSPs, and those JSPs are full of IDs. So they started to iterate, and then you end up having 20 times elements with the same ID, which is terrible for performance to find the right one, and also you will never be able to find the right one. You always being finding the first one.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
That's the problem of flexible templates. Yes, I remember I saw that in Maze. So why does it happen? Because the first time the person develops a template, it uses the ID because, okay, I'm just running this once. And another person decides to reuse and run multiple times. So my suggestion is avoid IDs. If you just want to find an element to refer to this element using jQuery, do not use ID. Because you can do the same thing using classes. Or using, if the thing is unique, you can annotate with data attributes. I'm going to show you an example here. So we have a project that contains stories, and every story can be deletable. So every story has a link to delete. So line 13. If I mark, so I need to find these elements to attach the event on the view story file. View story. So if I used an ID here, it would not be possible because it's repeatable. So I just create a data action delete, and I use this to retrieve the elements there. So there's a good thing here, because you might think, okay, if I have 10 projects, every project has stories. So maybe each project contains also 10 stories. So we have 10 projects, each project contains 10 stories, have 100 stories. So how can we see only the stories from one particular project? Okay, because if you look into the DOM, if you just go to the root of the DOM, you're gonna, if you just come here and search for, okay, data, everything that has a data action equals to delete, you will find lots of things. So that's not the right way. So the right way here is not searching from the root. Start to search from the parent element that will contain only those guys. Here is the project. So this is in Backbone. Backbone will only search this inside the EL, the element from this view. But if you want to do that in not using Backbone, like using jQuery or anything, you can just come and find one element first, and from that element you find others. So you can make 2 steps. Find, search, okay? Another thing you can do, if you don't want to call the find method twice, you can find, let me write here in, so you can find the, let's suppose we want to find the story, okay? Let's suppose I'm creating here, let's suppose we have a span that has a data type is story. But if we look here, actually this is jQuery, so span data type is story. So we could first search the spans, which the data type is project, and from that we call the method find. So this is one thing. Another way is to do that. So we search one and the other. We are using the CSS inheritance to find elements. Okay.
One thing to remember, guys, is that the document fragment, you can not just create elements there. You can attach many events that you want and then append that. It's like a block of DOM isolated. Then you can append it directly to the original, the whole DOM. then it's gonna be with all the events just for that part. Then it's better to define all the events. Yes, events also. All the events that you want to use for that block of code. Then you're gonna append the whole that DOM to the whole DOM, that fragment to the whole DOM, with all the events defined and everything else.
Yeah, so it's a very good practice.
Yeah.
Here, my suggestion is avoid IDs. Try to use data attributes. If you can't, just try to use classes. But even classes are better than IDs. But then make sure you call a parent element first to filter only those guys that you need. Okay? All right, so I'm almost over here. Here, it's the three things: create document fragments, data attributes, and ID. Last things about performance. So we have a garbage collection running in the browser. And each object will last as long as the function that is enclosing him will last. So if we define a small function, let's suppose here, if I have a function that contains another function, okay? If I define a var here, yes, this var will only last for this function. As soon as this function is done, I can create another thing or define another var, okay? If we do here, like I mentioned before, this will last. So C is present in all of those functions, and even after C is still exists here. So in order to improve garbage collection, you should try to keep the vars to the minimum scope, the most specific possible scope. If you do this, you are reducing the lifetime of your vars and helping the garbage collector to free more space. Okay. So that's why I don't recommend using this, or for instance, if let's suppose we have in this context here, this is a backbone view. So I'm creating some members, some attributes here. Those attributes, they will last for as long as the view object, okay? So if you wanted to pass a parameter from one function to another function, some people like, okay, let's create something into this. So let's suppose I have render and I have add1, and I wanted to pass one information from render to add1. So, okay, I will create here in the render, I can create this, my info is true, just to read that inside the add1. My info. This will work, but if you do that, my info will last as long as the view object. So in order to avoid that, we can create a var, pass this var as a parameter, use this var here. So if we do that, as long as this render function finishes, it can collect my info. Otherwise, my info would last forever, because this view is permanent. This view is permanent. It's not going to be removed. It's going to be displayed. So as long as the view is there displaying, there's my info. Okay? So that's my suggestion. Try to make the scope as like the most specific possible. Right? I don't know if I
what's the word?
wrote.
Raso.
Shallow. Yes. Okay. That's it that I had today, mostly. And I wanted to comment with the guys about the Vanilla.js, the guys on the phone. So before, do you guys have any questions? Do you want to discuss something today? Yes, today's session was lighter. Like it's not because the first session was better because I was showing you how to do lots of things. Chitão singing this. Today I just wanted to line some topics, okay? But it's not a core, okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, guys.
The same.
Okay, so I'm just going to go over the Vanilla.js for the guys on the phone. So guys on the phone, I wanted to present you Vanilla.js. So thank you, the other guys, to be watching.
My butt is flat.
Yes, your channel. We have a very good framework here, Vanilla.js. If you don't know this framework, you should know that it's the most widely used framework in JavaScript. It's being used by Facebook, Google, YouTube, Yahoo, Wikipedia, and it's already used on more websites than jQuery, Prototype, MooTools, YUI, and Google Web Toolkit combined. Okay? So what's the magic? If we just wanted to get this file and run to try it out, there's a generator here. We can select the libraries, the function that we need, and magically the final size is 0. I can select anything here, everything here, and the final size is going to be 0, 25 bytes gzipped. So if I download this, let's see the source code. The source code is there. Very beautiful. And it's even better. You can use this file on the development environment, but if you move to production, you don't need it. You can avoid it. So that's it. That is the magic of Vanilla.js. So actually, Vanilla.js is not a framework. It's not a library. It's just a movement to try to make people use the pure JavaScript instead of libraries. Because today, JavaScript is good enough to deal with situations in a less nightmare scenario, okay? If you compare how to get an element from the DOM here, using jQuery, you can do 350,000 operations per second. But if you use Vanilla.js, which is pure JS, you can do 12 million operations per second, which is much faster because there is nothing else that would be faster than Vanilla.js. So there are some examples here. The code is not easy to write sometimes. Sometimes the code is long, but it is very performant. So just to get an element, it's not a big deal. To make an Ajax call, I still don't like it because you need to... There's a lot of boilerplate code here. And jQuery makes things more readable. So if you're just doing one or small chunks of Ajax calls or getting elements, it's fine to use jQuery. But if you have a huge load of requests or elements that you need to retrieve or manipulate, you might consider. So in fact, just to get an element, it's easy. You can do this in one line, so it's not a big deal to do Vanilla.js way. So that's it. I just wanted to present you guys because over decades of web development, we have been using many and more JavaScript frameworks. So today we have thousands. And sometimes people just got used to those frameworks and forgot about the pure implementation. So it's good to be considered. Okay. All right. That's it that I had for today. Thank you guys on the phone. Do you have any questions? Thank you, Mark. No. Okay.
What is the version of Vanilla.js?
The version of Vanilla.js.
The last question.
Yes, it's a good question. Actually, so as you asked, Henrique, I wanted to show you something very quick here. So JavaScript is ECMAScript. In ECMAScript, they are creating a new version of ECMAScript. So ECMAScript 6. Actually, I think it's 7. No, I think 6. I was reading an article. So this is amazing. You can define classes. You can define high-level object orientation. You can define constants. You can define maps. You have a standard library. You're gonna have maps and sets and array, similar to what we have in Java. We have utilitarian classes for numbers, strings. So this is amazing. I will find an article about that. But this is something that's going to make things much better as of today. Okay? But that's
Can you
it.
hear me?
I can.
So we just have some issues when using IE, using the document, don't we?
Okay, I think the point is YouTube
Shall
could be used,
Yes.
but
So
we
I
need
think
to
you're
update the
low.
properties
You told me we have some issues in IE, right?
Yeah, when using the document.
The document.
We do that, we can use
Yes.
Yeah.
the YouTube.
Yeah. So that's why jQuery started. So jQuery started to be a standard way to call, because there are some tweaks that we need to do when using those
Oh, I
things.
see,
But
I see, I see.
the idea behind Vanilla.js that today the scenario is different.
Yeah, except
Like
for the
I don't know if you know about that, but the
working
new
except for
jQuery
the
version will not work on IE until version 8. I guess only after IE 9. So jQuery decided to move and like forget about the earlier versions of IE, and
I see.
because it's kind of ignoring the past, because it decided to go and use the best implementations ever. So that's the idea behind Vanilla.js. So in Vanilla.js, you can do most of things that are
I have changed
supported,
the name
but
from
using
front-end to
the
YouTube. Maybe we can keep the front-end
most
and
recent
then
version. So
YouTube
today we
and
just have a minority of people using versions lower than
the tool works
8.
with the front-end.
So
The main
it's pretty
front-end
safe to
project
go ahead and use
the name of the job.
Vanilla.js or Pure.js things, unless you have to provide support to. Specifically, you have to provide support to older versions. So
Actually,
then
we
you need
have
to
another
maybe
story
still use
behind
some
of
other
this
frameworks.
issue.
Yeah, I see.
The story.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for your question.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Okay, guys. So I think I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna record this in a video so you can watch it later. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Okay,
Thank you, Joe.
thank you, Thiago. Bye.
Thank you.